Hey, Rachel Sarah Thurston, welcome to the Tick Bootcamp podcast.
Hey, I am stoked to be here.
And we're really stoked to have you as well. And I know our folks are going to be really stoked, not only because you're here with us, but so is one of our favorite and our community's favorite guest co-hosts, Ashley Mauber. Ashley, say hi to the folks.
Hi, thank you so much for having me back. I always feel so honored to be a part of this, so thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for connecting us with this wonderful guest that we have.
Yeah,
Ashley, I'm so stoked to be here. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I'm excited to dive into your history. I find it amazing. Like, I am just blown away. I can't wait for everybody to hear this.
But before we get there, let's talk about what you're doing now, Rachel Sarah. What kinds of things you have going on? Because you are a Renaissance woman with many talents, and you've made many contributions over the years. You're not as old as me, but you're not. You've been around a while. You've done a lot of things. When we talk about what you're doing right now, where can folks find you, and what kinds of things are you putting into the world right now?
Yes, so originally a Midwesterner from Indiana, but I've been out west for 29 years now. I am a multi-creative Renaissance woman. So I've been a freelance writer for 25 years. My master's is in writing. I've also had a photography business for 20 some years. I now am I've been a blogger, blogging about world travels around the world, and more recently around my journey healing from Lyme disease. And I have a new website that will be in the podcast notes, rachelsarah.thurston.com. And it'll have some of my published work and advocacy for people who are survivors of chronic illness. I was also a rock and roll singer in a top band that performed at all the top venues throughout Santa Barbara County called King Bee. I just retired last year after 22 years. And my background before this, I worked in the health field. I almost went into medicine. And before that, my very adventurous side is I was an outward bound instructor, a park ranger, and a river guide throughout the American West and on the Canadian and Mexican borders, and traveled all around the world. My mom and I have spent a month every year going to a new place in the world on a shoestring budget, usually developing world countries. And we've been doing that for 20 to 25 years. And
All
I was also a dancer too. So I guess I'm sharing more of my life before. Is that
Yeah,
okay?
no, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
But let's give people a context for you now, right?
Yeah.
Because I'd like to know more. I'd really
Okay.
like to introduce our folks to your businesses or your business,
Sure, sure.
and let's let them have that understanding of where you are now and where this journey is
That
taking
sounds
you, and then
good.
we'll go through it
Then
all.
we'll unwind. Okay. Present day Rachel. Um, I have two businesses. I work with authors. My business name is State of Sparkle, and I help authors with author branding and book marketing. And I love it. I work with authors across all publishing pathways and genres, and it's fabulous. Stateofsparkle.com is that website. And I am also
But
myself,
before you go there, because I'm
yeah.
just personally interested, perhaps. We have not shared with our audience before today, but since we have you, Matt and I are actually working on our first book.
That's so
Uh,
cool.
so tell us more about what your company does, because you've given us some
Yeah.
general descriptions of what you do, but I don't know what any of that means. So help me
Yeah, a
out.
lot of people glaze over actually when I say that. They have no idea what that means unless they're authors. Okay. So what happens is this ties in a little bit to a question down the line. I have been working in writing, photography, marketing, event promotion, entertainment, and I felt I wasn't really filling my heart and soul anymore. I was out of alignment and going through some of the darkest times with Lyme and going through the pandemic. It was really an eye opener around, life is so precious. I need to get into alignment with what I want to do. And I was meditating. I was doing somatic therapy, like limbic retraining. And I just heard the word state of sparkle. And I thought, that's me. I'm a sparkly person and I want to help people live their best possible life. So I'm using all of these skills I've learned from so many different fields. And my wheelhouse is authors and creatives. So I help authors be seen in the world. You know, there are millions of titles, 3 million titles in the US that come out every year, 3 million different book titles. So I help authors build their platform, focus and hone in on their brand, and then I help them come up with the best strategies to market their books so they have long-term longevity and success. And I
Okay.
love it.
That
I
sounds really cool. So talk to us about your second business.
Yes, my second business is like coming back home. I've been a freelance writer for magazines, newspapers. I've contributed to a couple of travel humor anthologies. I wrote a book as well. And during the days I got very sick, the dark times, I had to stop writing. Now that my life force is coming back and I'm working with authors, I'm just so excited to do a book of my own about part of this journey. So I am working on my new website, rachelsarah.thurston.com, and it's going to highlight all my blogs from over the years, world travels, and my inspiration for living your best possible life in spite of challenges. For instance, healing from chronic illness, healing from trauma and PTSD. Or
All right.
there's, I'm very, very passionate about being an advocate for so many people that don't have a voice.
So let's talk about the early part of your life's journey.
Yeah.
We need to give folks the ability to now step into your shoes and go on this journey with you. In order to be able to do that, we have to build out Rachel Sarah for folks. So where did you grow up? And what was your vision during your early life for how you were going to serve the world?
I like that. I'm really thinking about that. I know the answer to the first part, but how did I want to serve the world? Okay. Um, so I grew up in Indiana in a very, very small town, and then I spent the weekends in a wilderness area of southern Indiana. I was surrounded by the woods and ponds. We had an exotic animal farm, which I had a blast growing up at, learning all sorts of animal calls. My parents were huge travelers, so I think my first international trip, one of them was to South Africa and Botswana. Um, I was a very, very extroverted kid. I was always happy. I always had boundless amounts of energy. I started performing as a dancer when I was quite young. My mom's a Turkish Egyptian choreographer and dancer. So I grew up on stage in front of people. I grew up with a lot of animals in the woods. And I think, I dreamt about it doing a lot of things. I don't know that I thought of it in the context at that time of being of service, but I knew I wanted to travel and I wanted to explore the world and I wanted to meet really interesting, cool people.
All right. So talk to us about this exotic animal farm you had, and did that give you any insight into the importance of being tick and Lyme aware?
Um, it was an absolute blast. And there was no tick awareness at that time. I mean, I was born in the 70s. And I heard you guys interviewing someone recently about ticks back then. I've told my husband and again, I don't ever remember there being that many ticks growing up in Indiana. So I wasn't conscious of it. But I was like, I had a very hardy immune system because I was in the woods. I was rafting on the creek behind the house. I was with tons of animals, licking my face. I was with a lot of exotic deer, birds, tigers, llamas, zebras, I mean, around all sorts of animals. And so I think it was good for my immune system and it was very joyful. And it was a really great introduction to wilderness that my parents and my dad especially gave me.
All
But
right.
no awareness really. I don't remember ever there being a lot of ticks like there are now when we go back to Indiana. It's just
Right.
insane.
Well, yeah, it's the question always is are there just more ticks all over because we're aware of them, or are there just more ticks now than there were then? And I mean, I think we can
It's
go back.
B.
Yeah, well,
It's B.
I can tell you that's as somebody who grew up in a tick endemic community. I mean, we had ticks everywhere. Folks on this podcast have heard that during my childhood. I'm older than you. We're talking about in the late '60s and the early '70s. We would have to do tick checks every day when we came into our house. Before our dog came into the house, we would have to do tick checks in our mudroom. And on a shelf in our mudroom, we had what my mother thought was a tick kit. It's a janky tick kit where we had a vat of Vaseline, and we had tweezers and napkins and a match, where we would be checking our dogs and pulling and we put Vaseline on the tick because we were taught that it would cause the tick to back out. We now know that's not true.
Yeah.
We would put Vaseline on the tick, and then we would be pulling out the tick, and then we'd wrap it in a napkin and take it outside and burn it. Right, that's what we were taught to do. And we're talking about, again, in the late 60s and early 70s, we were doing, there were ticks all over. Anytime we went in the woods, and I lived in a relatively rural community as well, we would have ticks on us. It was just part of our lives all the way back then. And I've asked some of my friends that I grew up with whether or not they remember ticks as much as I did. And they said they did, but they just didn't seem to have the same awareness that we have now. Are they more or less? I don't know. I just don't know. I think you start to see what you become aware of. You start to see what you focus on, and I don't think it's as new as a lot of us would think. But yeah, an interesting point. So let's stay with it. So you're an Indiana gal, Midwestern gal. You're passionate about learning about the world and meeting interesting people and going to interesting places, and then you go off to school. So where'd you go to college, and what was your major?
Yeah, I went to a really, really well-known school in the Midwest. You guys have probably heard of it because you're not people from California usually. I went to Miami of Ohio, which is in Oxford. And Ashley, I know you're in California. The Californians tend to not know schools out east, but it was a really solid, great public school. I got to design my own major. I took classes in 16 different departments, which really satisfied my interdisciplinary mind. I created a focus on the conservation of natural and cultural resources. And I studied in Australia for a semester. I ultimately ended up doing my thesis on the reintroduction of the gray wolf to the Rockies and the socio-cultural metaphor that the wolf represents in our culture around wilderness. We want to dominate the wilderness or romanticize it, and there's no in between. So it was a wonderful undergrad education.
All right. So you then go to graduate school. Were there any work or travel experiences between
Oh yeah.
graduate
Yeah.
school?
Yeah, I didn't go to graduate school right out of school. I'm grateful for that. I wanted to study ethnobotany, and I wanted to study Latin American, like in the Andes, ethnobotany. But thank goodness I didn't get into that school, and I went to river guiding school. And I just had this dream all through college. I think it's because my parents had given me a taste of adventure travel. I just wanted to lose myself in the world. I wanted to explore and just go camping and disappear in the world. So I started a 5-year journey of living out of my car and tents and Tupperware. And I worked on the American River in California. I worked on the Rio Grande. Yeah, Rio Grande. That's right. It's Ashley's homeland up there.
I know that place.
Worked on the Rio Grande in Texas and Big Bend National Park, in northern New Mexico, Taos. Spent a lot of time in Arizona. Worked seasons in Utah, and did outward bound wilderness trips in Canada, in the upper Minnesota boundary waters areas. And then would travel out of the country, backpacking by myself, in between my work stints. So I was outdoors all the time. I was living outdoors 90% of those years.
And you were guiding other people in their outdoor experiences, right?
Yeah, when I talk about outward bound, I just joke that I took kids into the wilderness and I made them cry. the, the whole purpose of outward bound is to push people's comfort zones, and they hate you for it. But the ones that hate you for it, months later, you get letters going, "You changed my life. That was amazing. Now I know why you guys made us do what we did." But yes, we'd be out there sometimes for 23 days at a time. The river trips were shorter, maybe 1 day, 3 days, 5 days.
right, so while you were training folks to enjoy the wilderness or
Survive.
become a part of it or whatever else you were making them do during the course of the tiers that you were triggering, um, were you training folks how to keep themselves safe from parasites, including ticks?
Yes, it's funny. Yes and no. Didn't talk about ticks still. So this would be the 90s. This was 95 to 99, 2000. It's funny. So we did a lot of safety talks for water hazards, for being stuck under a raft or dump trucking on a raft or foot strainers. I'm a big safety girl. I love giving those safety talks. Outward Bound, tons of safety talks. We had special protocol for when there's lightning coming through. You had to pull all the kids out of the tents, sleeping bags, stand on your heels of your feet, on life jackets to avoid lightning. We had tons of bug spray, horrible bugs, and we had iodine for giardia. But I do not remember anything around ticks. It's interesting that you asked that. And that is the first time I got giardia. I got it really bad that season. I think that started to plant a seed of parasite issues. It's funny. I don't remember any ticks in Minnesota in the 90s either, but I mean, tons of horseflies, uh, black flies, and bugs, horrible bugs.
All right. So talk to us about your next set of professional or educational
Yeah,
pursuits after your time as a guide, I guess I'll call
sure.
it.
Yeah, so during those years, I was traveling to Latin America and Asia and Australia on my own. I was writing about it. Then I decided to come to Santa Barbara. I had a really rough last season in Utah, and it was just one of those moments when you feel like your higher power is telling you it's time to move on and get focused on your creative um, abilities. So that's when I moved to Santa Barbara, and I kept guiding for another 6.5 years here part-time. I did ropes courses. I guided ocean kayaking, biking trips, wine country trips. And then I started working I was still interested in going into medicine. My father's a very accomplished, respected surgeon. My great grandfather was a doctor. And all those years I was traveling, I really had a dream to be an emergency travel doctor. So I worked at a medical clinic in the capacity like a nurse for 3.5 years, and I just saw how incredibly unhappy all of the doctors and nurse practitioners were there. And what's ironic about, life is that I didn't take that path, but with what happens down the road, you end up having to become your own doctor and advocate. So um, I did those things, and I started immediately when I moved to Santa Barbara. I got an internship thanks to a friend at the Santa Barbara Independent, which is an award-winning newspaper here. And when I showed up there, they said, you have no writing experience. Just so you know, you can be here as long as you want, but you're never going to be assigned an article because you don't have any training. And in my mind, it was just something that I knew about myself, that I was a writer. And I worked really hard. And a month or 2 months later, I had one of the feature stories for the newspaper. And
Congratulations.
thank you. That was the beginning. And I started writing for magazine. And then I went to grad school at USC for writing.
Okay, so your major was journalism.
It was
Writing, what was the major?
narrative nonfiction. So yeah, I studied in all different genres, and I've also been attending the Santa Barbara Writers Conference for 22 years. But yeah, the graduate degree was fun to be a part of that program.
Okay. So give us some insight into when you started to feel symptomatic. And we're foreshadowing a little bit here, but when did you start to feel symptomatic prior to getting a diagnosis?
Do you want me to tell you when I first got sick but didn't know it? Because that would be the first.
Whatever it is, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not trying to. I'm your guide, so I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to funnel you anywhere. I'm just trying to get us started on when you started to be sick.
Okay. So we're gonna go back into a little time machine. 1980s. I was talking about the trips that my parents would take me on. I had the opportunity to go to South Africa in 1987. So this is a really wild time to be there. It's still during the years of apartheid. We were on safari in South Africa, and I didn't know what had happened, but I know I was starting to get really sick the first week we were in camp, and I had lymph nodes the size of golf balls. I had so much fatigue, and I had just full body cramping and joint pain. And I told my parents, I remember I told them right before dinner, and for some reason they didn't believe me. They just thought I was whining, which isn't really like me to do. And they didn't really believe me for the rest of the trip until we were coming home. I just started throwing up uncontrollably on the plane, and all of my symptoms got worse. And when we got back, my dad was like, all right, maybe she wasn't making this up. I'm going to check both of you. And I still have a scar from the lower part of my back where a tick had bitten me. And my mom, he found a live tick in her, and he, never missing an opportunity for a published medical paper, he cut her open on the floor of our living room the day after we got back from our trip. And he sent it in, and he wrote a paper about tick bite fever. And we never got treated. I was never put on antibiotics. And it was at that time called tick bite fever.
Okay. So how old are you then?
So I was 14. Yeah, 14 years old.
All right. So how was your health between the ages of 14 and your time at graduate school in California?
Yeah. I was overall super healthy. I had tons of energy. But when you look back on it, I think as every Lyme survivor does, you start noticing some anomalies. And I heard someone recently on one of your podcasts talking about this. I had tons of energy. I had a metabolism through the roof. Um, I did have chronic strep for so many years in high school. And my Lyme doctor thinks I probably had pandas. Am I saying that right? Pandas. Not the bear, but the thing, the
Yep,
acronym
yep, yep.
pandas. And I was on tons of antibiotics. And then later, I had always had some anxiety, but I think later some of the first things that showed up for me were being really OCD and having anxiety and having some panic attacks. That's what happened later. But in high school, that was really the only thing that was showing.
All right.
I
So
didn't connect
tell
it.
us when you finally got diagnosed with Lyme disease. Ashley's going to take you from that point forward, but tell us
Yeah.
when you finally got diagnosed with Lyme disease.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, I'll say it in terms of the wall. 17 years ago, my mom and I was living in a condo um, in Santa Barbara. My mom and I had just gotten back from a trip to Morocco. Again, we had been going on these trips to very developing world countries like Nepal and India, no problems. A month or two after we got back from Morocco, I just hit this wall. And this was in 2007. I believe it's 2007. Um, I hit this wall and I felt like I had mono. I just felt like I couldn't get my energy back, or it just, I felt like something wasn't right. Um, and I went, and I just remember, my nurse practitioner who I told, I don't feel right. I want to get tested for some stuff. I'm super achy. I have tons of fatigue. And she told me, she's like, Rachel, you're fine. And I said I had gained weight. I was like puffy all over, tons of weight. And she said, Rachel, you're fine. You just need to learn portion control. It's just you getting older. And I'm thinking, I'm in my 30s, lady. I'm not old. What are you talking about? I knew something was wrong.
All right. So as I said, Ashley's going to take you from this point forward, but I want to look back with you for a few more questions.
Yeah.
Um, do you believe that before this chronic presentation surfaced, that you had been bitten by a tick either in Morocco or after you had gotten back from Morocco or before you left Morocco? I mean, do you think there
No,
was any contact with a tick?
this is what happened. I'll never know 100%, but I'm almost positive that it was in 1987. I had gotten so sick. I think it went dormant. And I, for years, tried to figure out what it was that triggered it in the spring of 2007. this is what happened. It took me another 15 years to figure this out. Um, my condo had flooded before we went to Morocco a year earlier. I had the guy above me, his faucet he pulled the faucet out of the out of the wall accidentally. So there was 45 minutes of water coming through the floors above into all the rooms of my condo. And I had professionally had it cleaned up and dried, and they had told me, don't open up the wall, don't look inside. I didn't know anything about mold at that time. I was just following, the service providers. But now I know that I had been exposed to mold for a good year, and I'm fairly sure that that exposure triggered the Lyme in my body to become active.
Well, it suppressed your immune system and allowed the Lyme, which had been managed as part of your microbiome, to no longer be managed.
Yep. And then it took a century to figure that all out.
Yeah. No,
But it was like
and
a
it's
lock and a key.
it's unfortunately very, very common. In this podcast, one of the patterns that we've seen is that and we've actually had Dr. Rawls and Dr. Phillips, for example, both make this observation either to us or in their books. And that is that very rarely does someone go from tick bite to chronic illness.
Yep.
You generally don't have that presentation. It's generally some gap in time,
Yep.
except if you're bitten by multiple ticks at once. There were people that trip into a
Ooh,
tick nest and have several ticks
yikes.
feeding them at the same time. They will, in many cases, have their immune system overwhelmed by all the germs that are being spit into them by multiple bites. Or we have people who are living in a moldy environment and then get bitten by a tick. And because they're in this immunosuppressed state, their body can't manage all the microbes that are being spit into them by the tick. But we also see in many, many cases that, many, many interviews we've done here, that mold chronic presentation experience that you had, where despite you being very healthy for your life and having a robust immune system, that time living in a moldy environment, unfortunately, was immunosuppressive. And despite having the ability to manage these microbes and manage the Lyme in particular, the pot boiled over, to use the Dr. Rawls metaphor, and you became chronically ill.
Yeah. And blindly so. I had no idea there was mold there. I had no idea I had mold illness. I had no idea it was tick related too.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
just blind for so many years.
All right, so you're now sick, and now you're going to get diagnosed. So Ashley, why don't you take Rachel Sarah through that next phase of her journey?
Hi, Rachel.
Hey.
Hi. So I can definitely relate to what you're saying about mold. I find that so fascinating, and I want to highlight that
Yep.
because I'm thinking of my own Lyme journey and how being exposed to mold and living in a home filled with mold, how that triggered my Lyme symptoms, not knowing I had Lyme at the time and getting so sick and not knowing why. So I find that really interesting, and I think that's so key for our listeners to hear that. Um, okay, so going back, you think you were exposed to Lyme at the age of 14. You were bit by a tick. You were diagnosed with tick bite fever, but you were not treated. So I
Mhm.
find that really interesting. And then, how many years went by? What age were you when you finally got a diagnosis?
Yeah, so that was 1987. I was 14 years old. And then fast forward to 2007. So what is that? 2007 would be 30 years later, right? Um, 2007, I start getting sick, and I have a timeline here. I'm such a nerd. I wrote out all of the dates. Um, so I went to a lot of doctors. I mean, it's the classic Lyme hero's journey, right? Lots of doctors. I eventually saw the thing that helped me get the right diagnosis is I saw Under the Skin, the original documentary. When I
Yes.
saw that, it was just this epiphany, just this aha that, oh my gosh, this is what I have. I was so excited. I went to see, I found a doctor that was doing IGeneX testing, Dr. Scott Saunders in Santa Barbara. In his office, he had a renowned Lyme doctor, Dr. Jennifer Salcido, who had studied with Klinghardt, and she ended up being such a huge guiding force in my life. But I went to get tested, and I'm telling Dr. Saunders, I'm so excited. I'm finally going to figure out what's wrong. And he leans over the desk and he goes, Rachel, you don't want to be excited about having this. This is a horrible illness. And I said, Dr. Saunders, I know it is, but it's worse not knowing what it is. Those of us that have been sick for so many years, we want validation and we just want to have direction, a compass for what we're going through. So it came back super positive, and that was 10 years ago. So it took 7 years for the diagnosis from when I started getting new symptoms. And then 10 years ago, got the diagnosis and started working with Dr. Salcido.
And how many doctors, just a guesstimate, would you say you had to see before you got to Dr. Saunders and Dr. Salcido?
I don't know. I mean, I think I was pretty frugal. So I didn't want to spend a crazy amount seeing a lot of doctors. I saw a combination of different types of healers and practitioners. I would say 7 to 10. Yeah.
I'd say that sounds about average,
Yeah.
unfortunately, for a lot of people on their Lyme journey, having to see so many doctors, finally getting an answer, thankful for an answer, and then the doctors telling you, no,
Yeah.
this is not good news. I also saw Dr. Saunders. He diagnosed me as well, and then sent me to see Dr. Salcido, and we had
Yeah.
that in common. Both
Yeah.
great doctors, love them so much. I'm so thankful for them and their fight. Um,
Can I
and
add?
we'll talk more about Dr. Salcido because we have a little special message that we want to say
Yeah.
about her.
Could I
One,
add something to that quote, to
yeah,
that answer, Ashley? I just wanted to say too that so others out there that are listening to this might be able to relate that, it was like before I finally got that diagnosis, you're peeling back layers, and every layer that you discover, you're so excited, like this is it. This is the thing that is causing me so much trouble. And so it was years of that. It was like realizing, oh, I have adrenal fatigue. Oh, I have Hashimoto's. Oh, I have degenerative cartilage. A big one was I was working with another doctor, and she discovered I had Epstein-Barr virus. And this is something that really, really triggers me, is that there are some people out there that say, oh, it all starts with Epstein-Barr. And in my opinion, in my experience, Epstein-Barr is just a sign of a much bigger thing, that it's going to flare up when you have a deeper issue like Lyme. So yeah, it was a relief to finally get that diagnosis.
yes, I agree. I also got diagnosed with chronic Epstein-Barr virus, and I think it's just another sign or symptom that your immune system is compromised.
Yep.
And what's compromising that you don't know until you've had, I don't know how many tests, but that's the frustrating part. So how many things or diseases were you misdiagnosed with before they finally realized it was Lyme disease?
Oh, I mean, the nurse practitioner I had said I was just getting older, weight gain. Um, I did have someone tell me I have degeneration of the cartilage in my knee, all the things that I mentioned, the adrenal fatigue, but they were all layers. They were all real layers to it. There wasn't anything super wrong that they gave me. It was just pieces of the puzzle, with the major puzzle piece missing.
Right. Did you ever think, I'm too young for this? This isn't connecting. This isn't making sense. Did you ever have like
Uh,
an
Later, I
intuition about something else was going on?
Yeah, in the last 10 years, during the lowest points of this journey, I have felt like I was 100 years old, and not a happy, healthy. I mean, I've known 100-year-old people that are really vibrant. I didn't feel like them. I felt like crazy old, and it feels very unfair when you are young and you lose so many years of your life. Especially, I will say, I'll just bring this up, that it robs us of so much. And one of the things that it robbed me of was having a child. By the time I met my husband, I was 40, and I was just hitting the worst parts of this disease. And at some point, we had to make peace with, like, this isn't going to happen in this life. But I have the amazing gift of an incredible son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter. So I feel like the universe gives us these beautiful gifts in unexpected ways.
That is beautiful. And I'm really sorry to hear that. I can hear the sadness in your voice when you say that, but I also hear that you're so thankful for what it did bring you. And we sometimes we get to choose our family, and that's a beautiful thing too. So
It is.
I have children, and I can say it's a little stressful. I love them, but they kind of stress me out. But I can also relate. I'm 44, but I feel like I'm 84. And I know we were talking about this the other night, and you're like, that's the Lyme. And I was like, darn it.
Yeah, and Ashley, huge hats off to you. I mean, I've talked with my husband about, I cannot imagine having made it through the last 10 years have been the hardest for me with children because just basic self-care is gnarly hard sometimes. And I hats off to you and to all the others that are parenting while dealing with their own illness.
Thank you. I would say that is the key word, and that is my word of the day and of the week and of the month is self-care, self-care, self-care. Like, what does that mean? Like, like really taking care of yourself, what we eat, what we do to relax, what we watch, what we listen to, all of the things. I think that's so important. Okay, so to go back into your Lyme journey, um, the type of Lyme diagnosis that you received, what specific tests did you do to finally get that answer? What test was it? Dr. Saunders that ordered it?
Yeah, I did the IGeneX test. I don't think I did. I'm fairly sure I have had Babesia and Bartonella, but we did a standard Borrelia, and it came back like the initial one was super positive. They didn't have to do many extras after that. Yeah, the IGeneX one. And
And
all
did
of my
he,
symptoms lined up too.
sorry, I was just curious, did he say anything to you that this could be Lyme, your symptoms are matching up with Lyme disease, or did he use the blood test to confirm that?
The blood test, I kind of knew. I don't know. You just know when you watch the documentary. It's like that's me a million times over. And there wasn't any more diagnosing until the blood work came back, and it was a very clear positive. And then he sent me to Jennifer Salcido.
And Dr. Salcido, did you want to say something about her?
Yeah, yeah. So, and I know we're going to get more detailed around what treatments I've done and who has helped me along the way. But I would not be here on this earth right now if it weren't for my mom, my husband, and two instrumental people that have helped me on with the medical journey. And that was Dr. Jennifer Salcido, who is one of the most gifted healers I've ever had the pleasure of knowing, and Caroline Di Loretto, who is one of my best friends that also had Lyme and mold illness. And she wrote this book, From Lyme to Light. And Jennifer and I both contributed to this book. It's on Amazon, From Lyme to Light. And we just did these book signings a year ago, and we were so excited to do so much more. And they both passed away this year, 10 weeks apart. They had the same birthday. And I wanted to dedicate today to Jennifer and Caroline. I want any of us who knew Jennifer or Caroline know what a huge loss it is on earth. They both held my hands through the darkest of times. They were my lifelines and life jackets, everything, my soul sisters. And I'm just deeply grateful to both of them. And everyone who knows and loves them is missing them like crazy right now. So thank you to Jennifer and Caroline. And Ashley also knew both of them. And we know Ashley, I wouldn't be here today on this podcast without Ashley. And Ashley and I met through Jennifer and Caroline. So it's
The book signing.
at the book signing from
Yeah,
this book,
very
From Lyme to
special
Light.
moment. So thankful for that.
Yeah, thank you for letting me do a shout out.
Thank you for sharing. I know that's hard. I know this is a big piece of your life, and it's been really emotional. I'm trying not to cry right now.
I know, me too.
Um, so Dr. Salcido was then the doctor to treat you after your diagnosis. Is that correct? And what are some of the treatments that you received for Lyme once you had your diagnosis?
Well, I have, let's see, 3 pages of single type notes. I will I will read through them. Thyroid support essential because Lyme in my body has attacked my endocrine system first. Thyroid, adrenals. I did live bee venom therapy for a year and a half. I'd love to tell you guys more about that. Super powerful for neurological issues. Ozone treatments for parasites and immune system. I studied mediumship to focus my intuitive abilities, healed boundaries with people. I did neurofeedback, tapping, energy cord cutting. I took the dynamic neural retraining system through Annie Hopper, which is helping limbic impairment. Yoga, walking, grounding, earthing, cannabis, support for methylation pathways. I worked with the Lyme researcher Bob Miller, and he's got some fabulous supplements for targeting, variants that people with Lyme have. Parasite treatments, SIBO treatment, gallbladder, detoxing, paleo diet, avoiding mold, doing binders, homeopathy, hugely helpful. Having an amazing support team, and then a few other things: vitamins, antibiotics, hyperbaric chamber, hydrocortisone, prolotherapy, cryotherapy, acupuncture, UV light treatments that are done straight into the blood. They pulse UV light to kill microbes in the blood. Rife therapy, colonics, enemas, past life regression therapy, Reiki, and drinking turpentine.
The crazy things we do to treat our disease. When you feel sick, you're like,
Yeah.
that's how you know how sick you are. You will try anything to feel better because
Such a
the
journey,
average
isn't it?
person would look at that and be like, what are you doing?
I'll just say too, if 20-year-old Rachel had heard this podcast, someone else talking about this, I just roll my eyes like, what a bunch of wackos. I grew up with a very, conservative, allopathic oriented culture. My dad's a very talented surgeon, but I had so much judgment towards alternative medicine. And it's so ironic being on this journey, but I'm open to so much. Some of these things have been incredibly powerful.
Right? Isn't it amazing how it changes your perspective, your understanding, compassion? You never look at medicine the same way. You never
No.
look at disease the same way. It's multifaceted, multi-layered. It gives us so much knowledge, really. I mean, I guess for me, that's part of the silver lining,
Yeah,
and helping people.
you just have to be, an integrative, interdisciplinary. You have to have an interdisciplinary approach to heal these chronic illnesses. You have to address trauma at the energetic level. You have to address boundaries with people. You have to address the mechanical, the physical, the spiritual. It's a multifaceted approach for sure, and it's blown my whole world open. I'm a much more conscientious, compassionate person than I ever was before. I was a nice person. I wasn't like a jerk, but I'm a better person for sure.
I think that's the biggest lesson in all of this, really. I think a lot of us can relate to that. How long would you say that you've been doing these treatments for?
10 years. I'm not doing as much now. I'm in a better place now, but the things that are a constant for me are certain baseline supplements like vitamin D, 5-HTP, magnesium. I have to do a lot of thyroid support. I'm very careful about getting rest. I take a nap every day for rest. And I really try to keep my relationships healthy and high vibration. I've worked very hard on that, and spending time outside, but I'm doing homeopathy. I'm not doing anything too aggressive right now, though, at all. I'm in a different era of healing, which is nice.
Yes, as I mentioned, I'm 44 and I'm just now learning that it is really important who is in your life and
Yeah.
surrounds your life. And if they are adding to the toxicity, it really imbalances your hormones, your
Yep.
body, your immune system. the more love you have, the more supported you feel, I think the better that you feel. There is a psychological component to that for sure.
There absolutely is.
I
Um,
know that Matt and Rich are really big on asking these specific treatments, and I know you mentioned a lot, but I'm just going to repeat it because I know some of these are really popular for a lot of people that have treated their Lyme and their Lyme journeys.
yeah.
So have you used any of the following immunotherapies, herbs, hyperthermia, yoga, ozone therapy, IV glutathione, infrared sauna, stem cell therapies, probiotics, CBD, or sorry, I don't know the last one, bioresonance. That one I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, I've taken tons of herbs. Would have loved to have done hyperthermia, but I couldn't afford the clinics, but I was looking at that. Yoga, I'd love to do more of it. Ozone therapy, heck yes. I have taken glutathione in a lot of different ways. It hasn't done a lot for me. Infrared sauna, yes. Probiotics every day, CBD, yes. So yeah. Do you want me to share which of the treatments I listed are the most have been the most powerful for me? Because I know I listed a lot.
I think that would be helpful maybe to list like the top three
Yeah,
or the top five.
that sounds good. Um, First of all, boundaries with people. I mean, when we were talking about patterns earlier, the patterns that I've noticed among people with chronic Lyme tend to be women with trauma from when they were quite young, and they often are very type A driven women that have had trauma and they have codependent tendencies. And I just think that there's a huge connection between some of these chronic illnesses, being a woman, and having permeable boundaries with people. And I know Klinghardt compares, the metaphor of the permeable boundary with the energetic boundaries. So I've gotten so much better about healing from narcissists and healing from entangled relationships, people who have addictive personalities, they're not in recovery. So that's the first one is making sure that I'm around healthy, high vibration, uplifting people. The second one would probably be Bee Venom Therapy has been phenomenally powerful. Um, I stung myself with live bees with the help of my husband and my mom at times, uh, anywhere from like 10 or more stings up and down the spine every other day for a year and a half. I developed mast cell activation, so my body became super high toxic load. But I will say it took care of so many neurological issues. I'm thinking about going back to it because I'm noticing I'm having tremors in my hands. When I did it, all of my shaking went away. My scleras and my eyes whitened, and I had better cognitive abilities. It's pretty powerful. So that's
Rachel,
so yeah,
Rachel, sorry,
yeah.
my brain. Ugh. Um, I'm just curious for my own personal interests and anybody else that's in this area for the bee venom therapy. Do you use the one here locally in town, or is it something that you have shipped to your house? Because I know a past guest that we had, he had the bees shipped to his house from I don't know what state sent them.
Yeah, good, really good question. I was really lucky. I've had a lifelong relationship with bees. My dad was a beekeeper when I was little, and my band's name is called King Bee. And um, it's funny how bees have followed me wherever. When I first moved to Santa Barbara, I wrote a story about this beekeeper in Santa Barbara, and he became a mentor to me. So when I decided I wanted to do bees, I thought it'd be healthier to do local bees that wouldn't be traumatized by the shipping. So I'd go to his place and he'd scoop up with his bare hands a bunch of bees into what I have called it's a pizza hut that I bought on Etsy. And so we had bees in the house and I would travel with them. Yeah, and they were local bees that all had different personalities and
Oh,
pretty special. Yeah.
that is amazing. See, I never knew that you could do that. I just learned something new.
It's pretty amazing. And if anyone does it who's listening, you really want to join some of the Facebook groups for bee venom therapy. You don't want to jump into 10 stings because it can give you anaphylactic shock. You don't want to just sting yourself indiscriminately, and you definitely don't want to embark on this without having an EpiPen handy and children's Benadryl. So we always had those things that had the proper tools, but it's a really powerful therapy. Um, and it's also good for any degenerative neurological conditions. It's supposed to be good for Parkinson's, ALS, and there are a lot of medical studies on the pharmacologically active components of bee venom.
That's amazing. What would you say your
Yeah.
top number 3
Yeah.
treatment is?
Okay. So we've got energetic boundaries. We've got live bee venom therapy. The third one I would say is DNRS from the metaphysical perspective, is any type of somatic limbic system repair to help with the trauma that we have. I think anyone who makes it to the ages we are or has had a chronic illness and pain has severe trauma, and we have to address the brain injuries that we're all experiencing. So DNRS has been very powerful to be a part of all of these years. Okay, so we've got two more. It's really hard to pick. I would say treating parasites, um, detoxing, mold binders. I'm fitting in three more, sorry, but really quick ones. And then the last one is homeopathy. Caroline and Jennifer connected me with a really talented homeopathic doctor in Canada. And I don't know whether to share his name or not. I'm afraid he's going to get overwhelmed, but I'll do it. It's Dr. Ayubzadeh Sharam, and he is like an energy whisperer. I did a 5-hour intake with him, and he found a core remedy for me. And I had done homeopathy for years, nothing ever shifted for me. But I thought, I trust Jennifer and Caroline. I'm going to try him out. What do I have to lose? And I swear it has brought back my life energy these last 2 years. And that was like most recently one of the most powerful tools. And it was really finding the right practitioner, the right remedy, the right dose, and knowing when to go up to the next dose. It's really powerful.
I find that so fascinating, and I am excited to look more into all of this because that's definitely something I need to work on, especially with my nervous system. And you were just mentioning women that have gone through trauma um, and been around people that are narcissistic and
Yep.
unhealthy and challenges with boundaries. These are all things that I have had to open my eyes to and I've been working on, and I am just so thankful that you're in my life and you're
Me
giving me
too.
more information because we don't have our Lyme doctor here anymore. So it's just really a beautiful thing to have
Mhm.
access to this. I've been asking for something for help, and I'm sure you're helping so many other people listening to this right now. So I really appreciate it. I just want to say thank you for
Oh, I love you so much,
all of
Ashley.
that.
Ashley and I have talked about, Caroline and Jennifer both had memorials 10 weeks apart this year. And at Jennifer's memorial, Ashley and I sat together and we're just bawling because we've lost a good friend and this guiding light on our health journey. And the one beautiful gift that has come out of this is I feel like Jennifer is connecting so many of us from the other side. And I know that Jennifer and Caroline are so happy to know that we're all here today spreading awareness and that Caroline's book is still out in the world. I feel bottomless gratitude for both of them.
So thankful for that. So what percentage would you say um that you're back to your old self? Like how
Yeah,
much would you say these treatments have helped from when you started
sure.
when you were 14 to now?
I'm I'm significantly more I'm not in survival mode like I was for so many years. I had a couple of, and if there's time too, I can talk about this. I had near death experiences in 2019 and 2022. So I've had significant improvement because I've been able to work again. Um, I'd say it's anywhere from 65 to 75%. And the one challenge I'm dealing with right now is I'm 51 and I'm going through menopause. And that is a crazy roller coaster as a woman, have Lyme and menopause and just trying to find my way through it. I have a new Lyme doctor who's lovely that Jennifer helped me find before she closed her business. And yeah, I'm very grateful. On the days when I feel frustrated, I do look at that and think, I'm in such a better place than I was a couple of years ago.
I think that's so important
Yeah.
because I feel like when I'm researching Lyme and I'm trying to understand Lyme, something that's missing that I don't hear about is how hormones affect Lyme disease and the stages of menopause. So I'm in perimenopause
Yeah.
and I have terrible brain fog. My IBS is worse. I'm gaining weight. My joint pain is worse, and I wish I knew that before because I'm freaking out thinking I'm going into this terrible Lyme relapse or something else is wrong with me. And there's not a lot of research. I hope that's something that one day that doctors can focus on because I feel like hormones have a huge impact on Lyme and even our menstrual cycle, what the hormones that are in our body during
Yeah.
that time affects our symptoms. And that I find really frustrating and hard to deal with. And like you said, you've made leaps and bounds and you've done all of these treatments, and now here comes your hormones
Yeah.
to mess everything up. And
It-
I empathize with you. So, and I'm sure other women do as well. So,
well, yeah, it felt like I was finally getting my legs under me. Last year was one of the best years I'd had in over a decade. And then this hits me, and it's right on the heels of losing, the two guiding forces. So it's trusting that I have all the tools. I can feel them telling me, Rachel, you have all the tools you need. You're gonna find your way through this.
yes, I definitely agree. Do you feel like you're in a place with your symptoms, your Lyme journey, like everything that you've been going through, all your treatments, are you able to work currently?
Yeah, I've been really working hard the last 2 years. I opened my State of Sparkle business several years ago, but it's really the last 2 years I've been able to put all my energy on it, especially since leaving the band. And yes, I'm very grateful to have a job I can do from home, and I can handpick my clients, my author clients. And I do appreciate that every one of them knows I have Lyme disease. I don't know that everybody has an awareness of how bad it's been for me or what that encompasses, but I book my client calls around my energy, ebbs through the day. And I'm also excited to be getting back to my writing, and I'm working on a book now. So yeah. Did you guys want to know any of my worst symptoms, or I can't remember if we talked about it
Some
or
of your
no?
symptoms, some of the worst symptoms that you've had from Lyme?
Yeah, or I can't remember if we talked about that or what the hardest points of this journey have been.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead and share some of that?
Yeah,
I don't think that we completely delve into that. I feel like we kind of brushed over some of the symptoms. I don't think we kind of pinpointed each one.
I guess I wanted to share for people that are listening, if the people, I know that most of the listeners may be people with Lyme, but for those that don't have Lyme, if it's a loved one, it is just, it's probably the hardest thing I've gone through as a human being, as an adult. And I think the hardest, I've had like 100 symptoms that a lot of people can relate to, but I just wanted to say that the hardest moments for me on this journey have been the neuropsychiatric ones, where your brain is just, you can't trust your brain. And when I'm having bad flare-ups, my skin is just tingling, I'm raw, inside out. I've been paranoid at times. I've had almost symptoms that mimic bipolar, and had suicidal ideations, which I had never had before Lyme. I remember this one time when I was just crumpled in a car. My husband went into the grocery to get some things, and I was just in such a dark, dark place. And I read this study, and it showed that Lyme was associated with 79 neuropsychiatric symptoms, and I had 78 of them. And it's just that is something I want to share more of with people. How I think that's one of the worst things about this illness is that people don't always believe you. You look healthy on the outside. You look fully capable. You and I were talking about the placard, you know, and how people judge you, judge us on, oh, are you really sick or not? And that's the hardest part, is the invisible, what's going on in my brain, and those times when I couldn't trust my brain.
So Rachel, why do you think you were suffering from the neuropsychiatric symptoms? Do you believe it's because you had bugs in your brain? Do you believe it
Yeah.
was because of the inflammation associated with the disease? Do you believe it's because of the social gaslighting, the social challenges, changing neural pathways? Do you believe it was just neural pathways changing just as a result of your body adjusting to living in this disease state? I mean, or all of the above?
Yeah.
Give us your thoughts about what's happening neurologically, and why you think your presentation was as difficult as it was.
I think that it's the Lyme, as we know, Borrelia, and many of these other co-infections can cross the blood-brain barrier. So you have that cocktail. I had many years of SIBO and parasite issues that were an absolute nightmare. That was the darkest, darkest time. So you have these things passing the blood-brain barrier, and then when you're treating them with medications that also cross the blood-brain barrier, or I put ozone into my ear, you have really bad die-offs, and so they're releasing neurotoxins. And those things, those neurotoxins, make you go so crazy. I mean, they tell you that you're a horrible person. They tell you that no one loves you. They tell you that you're a burden to the people who love you. They tell you that why bother? Like, don't get out of bed. Don't take care of yourself. Just curl up and die, or do something to end it.
So,
That
but Rachel, give me more insight into
Yeah,
this. Do you think so? It's triggering your survival software, right? I mean, look, when we're hearing these voices, it's not us, even though it sounds like us, and it
yeah.
comes to us in our voice. It's really just survival software, right? And it's triggering the software to say these things to you. Why do you think that's the case? Do you think again, is it because neural pathways are being altered? Or do you think the neurotoxins are causing inflammation? What is your guess about what was happening in your brain?
Well, you're being poisoned. You're being poisoned by the bugs, and you're being poisoned by the neurotoxins, which are in your brain that you can't bind with and get rid of. And all of that going through that roller coaster with loved ones is creating more trauma, which is reinforcing the trauma neural pathways. So it's all of it. And it's just it's a nightmare. It's just such a dark, dark place. And when I was having the gut things like SIBO and parasite infections, you know, it's interesting that in the veterinary world, we recognize Lyme in dogs. We recognize Lyme rage. We recognize toxoplasmosis. Toxoplasmosis is notorious for making rats suicidal, so they're eaten by cats and then they're continuing the infection cycle. But for some reason in the mainstream medical world, we don't talk about parasites making people suicidal, or parasites making people go crazy, or how Lyme is a cousin to syphilis. You know, and syphilis made people crazy. So it's a nasty, nasty, nasty disease that manifests in so many different ways. But that's the worst that it's been for me, and also the years that I felt myself dying. Um, that's just been scary. And then that reinforces the trauma neural pathways. And it's really hard to get out of that limbic loop when you're having your worst nightmares manifesting again. Yeah, and you can't trust your brain. You can't trust what it's telling you. Now, my doctor and Caroline would also say too, on a metaphysical level, those bugs are trying to brainwash you into stopping treatments because they don't want to die. And that makes sense to me too. Or when you're killing things, it's hard to know, like you feel the death on a cellular level.
Yeah, and of course your body is also, your immune system is reacting to the dead bugs in your system if you're not able to detox, right? And of course, the blood, your gut is your second brain, and there are a number of different signals that are going to your brain when your gut is out of balance. I mean, there's just so many different pieces here. And the HPA axis, right, which
Yes.
is going to have a hormonal impact when your HPA axis is off. I mean, there's just so many different complex systems here that are going to play into the neuropsychiatric symptoms. And I was just wondering whether or not you had any more insight into why it was happening to you and how to treat that
Yeah,
for folks who are on this leg of their journey.
that's a good question. I just remembered that one of the years it was so bad, 2019, is when I was going through mold illness. Mold will just incapacitate you when your brain is burning, you can't think, you have horrible fatigue, and you can't make decisions, and you feel so overwhelmed, and it almost incapacitates you so you stay in the moldy environment. But the things that have helped me when I'm in those dark places is, one, have a buddy that you call, and Ashley and I can be each other's buddies. Caroline and I were each other's buddies. Like, when you're wanting to end it or you're feeling this despair, have somebody who knows the horrible thing that you're going through, that will be that lifeline for you. The second thing is going outside. The third thing is, when I had all those mycotoxins building up in me from the mold, I just feel horrible. And my immune system, sorry, not my immune system, my digestive tract shut down because of SIBO. I had no gut motility. So I had to do 3 hours of enemas every day for a year and a half. And that was a horrible time because I just felt like I was in a video game and I couldn't get past level 1. But every time I was done with the enemas, like, my mood lifted and I could feel my joy again. I didn't feel this despair. And it was such immediate validation that it was the toxins that were making me so sick. Another thing is sweating. When we went to Bali last fall, and the last time I was in Bali, sweating. I mean, I just feel like I sweat 1,000 pounds of of fluid. And I had almost no Lyme symptoms when I was in that heat and sweating. So all of those things can help, but continuing to address to the parasites, but that gut motility, the binders and the enemas are so essential, I think.
So let's talk a little bit about order, because we're going to start winding down and moving towards the other part of your journey, which is a journey of transformation. But if we could just wind down this piece of the conversation you're having with Ashley, we here at Tick Boot Camp are always looking for patterns. We're always sharing with folks patterns, and we've actually come up with
Yeah.
a healing pattern that we've seen others, well, many others use, and we actually have given a label called the PARM formula, right? And what we've seen is folks who are successful in healing is they seem to take this 4-step process where they first go through a prehabilitation process where they're looking at their major systems. They're looking at their sleep. They're looking at their movement. They're looking at their they're looking at their diet. They're looking at their fluid intake, but they're looking at some of the fundamental elements of getting themselves ready for a battle that comes along with when you're aiding your immune system, which is the A in our outline, where you're aiding the immune system in reducing the microbe load. But if you're not in a position, for example, where you're getting adequate movement and you're not sweating and you're not able to detox, or you're adding to the toxic load by eating foods that are not particularly healthy, or you're not getting adequate sleep and rest and allowing your system to rehab, or again, you don't have adequate bowel movements, and what's happening, of course, is when you get to this stage, you get to the second stage, if you're killing off a lot of the bugs, you're becoming more toxic, right? I mean, and it's adding to your toxic bucket and your toxic load. and of course that's going to have an impact on you emotionally as well. Part of the prehab, of course, is recognizing that we're energetic beings, and we have to make sure that we're surrounding ourselves with people who are not, energy vampires, who are not sucking energy up away from us, and making sure that we're really getting all those pieces in place. Because if we're gonna go on a healing journey, we don't have any extra energy to give to someone else, and we certainly don't have any extra energy to let somebody steal from us
Yeah.
if we're not dealing with ourselves socially. So that's the prehabilitation piece of this, which then leads us to the assist piece, recognizing, of course, it's the immune system that we're helping, that we want to rebuild. And then we have the rehabilitation piece, right? Where you have to rehabilitate yourself physically or physiologically, neurologically, and emotionally. And actually, going back to the prehab piece, of course, you do have to find a good mental health professional. You have to get yourself in as healthy a position as you can be emotionally, because this is going to be a very, very difficult journey. And unfortunately, there aren't enough people that are doing that. But then we get to the rehab piece, and you talked about reorganizing your neural pathways, right, with the DNRS. And we've talked with people about doing that early in their journey. What they've told us is, I was just way too sick to do something. That's a huge commitment. That was really something that we had to do later, which is why we've moved that over to the rehab piece. But of course, you have to rehab, and then finally, of course, you have to maintain, right? And you have to make sure that you're not going back to places where you're using alcohol, you're using drugs, you're staying up too late, you're doing running around with the boys and the girls and everybody else, hanging around with toxic people, those kinds of things. So give me your thoughts on that PARM formula, and whether or not that mirrored the order that you had done a lot of the work that you had done.
Well, can you give me the four, like just
Yeah,
one word for each four?
So P is prehabilitate.
Okay.
A is assist your immune system in reducing the microbe load.
Yeah.
R is rehabilitate, and M is maintain, or go into a maintenance pattern.
I mean, I think in an ideal world, that's fabulous, but I think every one of us that have dealt with this illness, you zigzag, right, with your healing. And I think you're right about the DNRS. I think it's helpful for people wherever they are on their journey, but I don't think people are maybe open to it earlier on, because when you're diagnosed, you're like, give me the antibiotics, give me the medication. I just want this over. You have no idea what a long journey you're embarking on. So I agree. Yeah, I agree with the principles of all of that. And the maintenance, of course, I think is something that I'll be doing the rest of my life, making sure I get good sleep, low stress, eating a paleo, whole foods, self-care, dealing with infections as they pop up. So yes, I think that's
I mean, this really is self-care, and of course, we want to make sure that
yeah.
we're not relapsing. And in so many cases, it's this chronic disease is really formulaic. At least we've argued that the risk of becoming chronically ill is formulaic, where it's going to be, if you can define risk the way, for example, Stanley McChrystal defined risk as vulnerability times exposure, right? And if you're going to define it formulaically, in many cases, the reason why we're no longer able to maintain the way you had the microbe load that you had is because you became more vulnerable, and you became more vulnerable because of other factors that resulted in you no longer being able to, no longer maintain the microbe load. So now
Yes.
let's talk about, let's pivot away as we wind down the podcast. Let's talk about the transformative impact that this journey has had on your life. How are you a more pure version of yourself, and how did you come to a better understanding of what God created you to do in serving the world?
I love that question. This is my favorite thing to talk about. While I wouldn't wish Lyme on my worst enemies, I think it's made me such a better human being. I'm a more compassionate human being. I'm more alive. I'm more present. I'm more awake. My intuitive abilities have sharpened. There's something about when you're facing your mortality and you have near death experiences or you're feeling yourself dying, there's nothing that wakes you up more than losing someone or feeling like you're transitioning for the other side. And that awareness has just made me crystal clear around making every day count. And I know that that sounds cliche, but that was the whole origin of my State of Sparkle, business name. I this year had another set of events happen that have been life changing for me, and it was losing Jennifer and Caroline. And we got to work on this book with Caroline, and I have for years wanted to write a book about my journey with Lyme and my travels around the world, and I just started working on that book. I I just feel an urgency of time. I don't know how long I have. I have, my life force is coming back, but I just don't take for granted how long I have. So I want to use every day, live it to the fullest, and do what I can as a writer and a storyteller to inspire and give other people hope. Um, the book that I'm working on right now is my mom and I, as I mentioned earlier, have been traveling for about a month every year the last 25 years. And it started out writing about our travel journey as a mother and daughter. But what I realized the larger journey has become is along these travels we've taken together around the world. She discovered she had had abuse when she was young, and she has severe PTSD, and she had rage when I was growing up. And during this time, I realized I have PTSD from my childhood, and I have PTSD from a chronic illness. And so this book is not just about her travels around the world. It's about us healing our mother-daughter trauma and healing generational trauma. And I just feel really, really excited every day I wake up that my brain is working, my body's working, and then I've been given more time on this earth.
So talk to us more about how this book is going to be not just transformational for you in sharing your experience, but how do you think it's going to transform the lives of others?
Well, that's a really good question. I will say that I do want to write another book solely about my journey with Lyme, but I felt like it was too soon and I wanted to have joy in it. So I'm mixing the travel with the generational healing. Um, I think people who love travel are going to enjoy it. I think people who yearn for closer connections with a parent or a loved one. And I've been blogging about these trips, and several of these stories have been published in books or magazines. And I know that people find the travel that we've done interesting and a little shocking sometimes. And I want to show that even when you've had severe trauma and abuse, like my mom has had, or you're dealing with a life-threatening illness like I have, you can still live a full life. And you might have to adapt the ways you travel and move about the world, but it's possible to still live a full, authentic life.
Yeah, so for sure, but I'm not sure that the order of your writing is necessarily what it other than what it should be, because I think if you look at our framework for healing, or at least the framework that we've observed others collectively utilizing, if you've had traumatic experiences, in many cases, it's what made you vulnerable to the threat of a disease, and it really is a place where you have to start. Right. We've argued on many occasions that it's actually the emotional healing that has to begin first, and
Mm-hmm.
then the physiological and neurological healing has to take place. So I think it's appropriate that, quite frankly, if I can make this observation, that you are starting where you're starting. and that you're helping people to go on a psychological or emotional healing journey, because I think you really have to do that first. And so many people are rushing into what you had explained before, into the antibiotics and the kill phase of their treatment, thinking that's going to actually be the shortcut, when in fact what we found on so many occasions, that if you do that too soon, it actually becomes a setback. We even had some people become substantially more chronically ill and wheelchair bound as a result of trying to kill too quickly and too aggressively, rather than going through the process of getting yourself ready for this. And I would argue emotionally first, right? So I think your book would be a great contribution to this community, so that we can help people order their healing and focus on the emotional, which we don't have enough of. Everybody is really running to again, whether it be allopathic or some other method of healing, naturopathic, when the truth is we really should begin with our emotional healing and our social healing, and recognizing that we're energetic beings, and we have to make changes in our lives so that we are in a better position to go through the battle, right? I mean, they don't send you to a war zone until you go through basic training, and we're going through a war, right? We need to get ourselves into basic training, and then through basic training, and that should really be making good choices about the food that we're eating, and the sleep that we're getting, and the movement we're doing, and the fluids that we're ingesting, and the social decisions we're making, and the relationship that we have with mental health professionals.
I like that you brought up that is a metaphor for this larger healing journey. And it made me think about, I want to do a huge shout out to my mom for how brave she's been in addressing her own trauma and the impact it had on me as her daughter. It's a unique gift that we have as mother and daughter, that I have a mother willing to look at this, and me, I need to look at my own stuff that I've done, healing from codependence. But her recognizing trauma she had had in her life gave me the permission to realize the trauma she had had on me. And I can then look at the other sources of trauma. And it's really beautiful to be on a journey with a loved one like that, and having intergenerational healing. And it's only going to be good for both of our health.
And I'm glad you're going to, you're beginning to share that with us on this podcast, and many folks are going to hear that. But I'm really excited to hear that you're going to be sharing that as part of your writing. And I do think it's going to be important for us to footnote this, so that when we interview you after you've completed that book, we can talk more about the importance of how our brain forms and what's happening during the first 25 years of our neurological journey, and how so much of what we have in our brain is just uploaded into our brain, in part based on experiences that other people are having that were traumatic for them, which then get uploaded into our brain. And in some cases, the way our brain is just interpreting what is before it, and how it ultimately builds traumatic pathways, or pathways that are not serving us any longer.
I should add too, I almost forgot that people don't have to wait for the book. They can keep up with my healing journey. I've been travel blogging for 25 years, and I send out a couple of really fun stories throughout the year. And I've been incorporating my healing journey from Lyme disease. And you can find that by going to rachelsarah.thurston.com. I know it'll be in the show notes as well, but you can sign up for that. And many of those stories have been published. And they're fun, they're entertaining, they run the gamut of emotion.
So I think that's a perfect way of sort of tying up this podcast. We began by urging folks to go to Rachel Sarah Thurston's website, and now we're sort of
Maybe
tying
one day.
back together. Yes. It would be really exciting for you to join us in the podcasting world. But now we sort of tied that together, where we were urging folks at the beginning of the podcast to visit your website, and now we're urging them to do that again, because they can heal along with you as you're healing. So why don't we use that as the perfect opportunity for Ashley to now ask you the final question of the podcast.
I just want to say real quick, I feel emotional listening to both of you
Mm.
talking about healing your emotional wellness. Like I'm always healing, I'm always working on myself, and you both have reminded me what I need to do to take care of myself. So thank you so much. You always make me feel seen and heard, and that is I'm so thankful for that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So sweet. Thank you, Ashley.
Okay, the last question is, what advice would you give to somebody who was newly diagnosed with Lyme? And just my little add-on to that is, what would Dr. Jennifer Salcido say about that?
Mm, I would say Jennifer, I'm going to say Jennifer first, would say she'd lean over and she'd say, it's going to be okay. Um, I I want to share something that happened with Jennifer that leads into this. When I was having a really dark, I was in a dark, dark place years ago on her table, and she was testing me, and I just broke down crying. I felt so broken. I felt like I was transitioning. There was no hope. And I said, "Gosh, I just one day I want to help people. I want to inspire people. You know, when I get better, when I get better." And she put her hand on me and she said, "Rachel, don't you get it?" And I said, "What?" And I'm just crying, ugly crying. And she said, "You don't need to be 100% healed to help other people." And she called me a supernova, and my mom is Mama Supernova, but it just was some of the best advice she gave me. And I would say that to everyone out there, that we do have to take care of ourselves first, but know that you don't have to be 100% whole to be worthy. And you don't have to be 100% whole to help and inspire others, because no matter how bad off you are, there's someone else that you might be able to help at some point. So that's Jennifer's advice. um, my advice would be something someone told me right after I got diagnosed, and that was that getting that diagnosis is just the beginning of this journey. That it is going to take a lot of patience and a lot of persistence and lot of positivity and optimism. That there'll be no one answer. That you need to surround yourself with super, super supportive friends and healers. Um, I would also say start something like DNRS and a meditation program, because you're going to need that for the brain support. And detox, detox, detox. And lastly, and most importantly, is listen to your intuition. Whenever you're in a place of fear, take 5 minutes to just breathe, focus on, no matter how bad things are, you could still focus on your wins. And that's a DNRS thing. And it's a part of a lot of programs, is write down 5 to 10 things that you're grateful for. And just maintain that connection to source, because it will be your guiding light through all of the decisions you have to make on this journey. And pat yourself on the back and realize that you're joining a mighty, mighty army of incredible light warriors, because people that I've met on my journey with Lyme are some of the most beautiful, compassionate, resilient, courageous human beings I've ever met. And it's an honor to me among you all.
Well, that is a perfect way to wind down this podcast. So Ashley Marber, thank you so much, as always, for being a beautiful guest co-host. You always do a fantastic job. And thank you for introducing us to this beautiful spirit in Rachel Sarah Thurston. And please, folks, visit her at her website at rachelsarah.thurston.com.
Thank you so much, both of you. Thank you, Rich, for all that you and Matt do for our community. We're very, thousands, tens of thousands of us are grateful for the service that you provide for our community. Ashley, I'm so grateful for you connecting me today. I love you. Thank you both.
Love you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.